The wind cut across the flats like a blade, dry and mean, rattling the tall grass and the broken fence wire that still clung to the posts like an old man to his pride. The sky above was the hard white of unwashed bone, offering no shade, no kindness. Dust clung to her eyelashes, gritted in her teeth. Her boots, second-hand and stiff, rubbed raw at her heels, but she kept walking her back to the sunrise, 6 small shadows left in the care of an older woman 3 miles behind her. She meant only to pass the ranch, not stop, not ask, just keep moving. The fence line ran parallel to the dirt road, and she followed it with the weary rhythm of someone who'd already done too much today and knew there was more yet to do. Her skirt clung to her legs, damp with sweat. The baby had cried most of the night, the little ones stirred and frightened by every coyote howl and creak in the floorboards. She hadn't slept. But this wasn't about sleep. This was about something else now. Something that made her walk past the horses and the rusted pickup and the man crouched in the dirt beside a wheelbarrow. He called out before she'd gone 10 more steps. "You lost." She didn't stop, just shook her head once. "No, you're headed nowhere." That made her stop. Not because it was wrong, but because it was exactly right. She turned slow and tight in the shoulders and looked at him. He was older than her, not by much, but enough to have lines around his eyes that didn't look angry. Hands in worn leather gloves. A smear of grease across his forearm. He squinted at her like he was trying to place a name to a face he knew he didn't recognize. "Where you going?" "Doesn't matter," she said, but her voice cracked and her lips stung from where they'd split. He straightened slow, brushing his hands against his jeans. "It does if you run out of water halfway there." She looked down at the ground, at her shadow stretched long and thin like it wanted to disappear before she could. The wind picked up and for a second neither of them spoke. "I got well water," he said. "Cold. Clean." She stayed still. "I ain't asking you in," he added. "Just offering a drink." That's what made her go. Not kindness, not pity. Just the plainness of it. The pump sat behind the barn, shaded by a sheet of corrugated metal. He handed her an enamel cup. She filled it, drank, then filled it again. The water hurt, going down sharp against a throat that hadn't had enough. "You got a name?" he asked. She didn't answer. He nodded like that made sense. "Kid's yours." She tensed the cup, shaking just a little. "Woman at the store said some stranger woman showed up yesterday with 6 little ones and no man. Figured she meant you." She looked up at him then. "If you're looking to send me back, don't bother." "I'm not. Everyone wants to." He shrugged. "I'm not everyone." She studied him, not with fear, she was too tired for that, but with the slow, coiled caution of someone who'd learned not to trust the easy face of decency. Then she handed back the cup and wiped her mouth on her sleeve. "I should keep going." He didn't argue, just nodded once. All right." She turned, stepped away. But then he called out again. "If you're set on walking, you ought to at least have better boots." She looked down at the cracked leather, blood just starting to show through the fabric where the blister had burst. "I've got an old pair in the barn," he said. "Too small for me, maybe just right for you." She didn't answer. He gestured with his head. "Come on. I'll show you." She followed him, this time slower, the silence between them thick but not unfriendly. Inside the barn it smelled of hay and rust and animals. He rummaged through a crate and pulled out a pair of scuffed work boots. "They'll need socks. You got some?" "No." He nodded again. I'll find you a pair." She didn't ask why. Didn't thank him either. Just sat on an overturned bucket and took off the ruined ones. He didn't stare. Just handed her a clean pair of wool socks and walked back outside, giving her the kind of privacy that didn't feel performative. When she stepped out into the light again, she was wearing his boots. They didn't quite fit, but they were better. The pain eased a little. He was leaning against the fence, watching the horizon like it owed him something. She stood beside him, silent. "You could work," he said, like he was talking about the weather. "If you needed something. Barn needs mucking. Fences need mending. Pays not much, but it's something." She didn't answer. "Not charity," he added. "That part mattered." "I'll think about it," she said. "All right." She turned to walk again. This time she didn't get far. "Hey," he said. She paused. "You ever fix a fence?" "No." He handed her a hammer and a tin of nails. "Now's a good time to learn." She took the hammer without a word. Its weight was strange in her hand, solid, unfamiliar. The tin of nails rattled as he led her along the fence line. The posts leaned like old men after a storm, and the barbed wire drooped in sagging arcs between them. It was not a fence that kept much in or out. They walked in silence, the dry grass brushing against their legs, locusts clicking and buzzing in the heat. He stopped at a post split clean through at the base, bent inward like it had given up standing. "This one's done for," he said, crouching to inspect it. "You ever pull a post?" She shook her head. "Good," he said. "You get to learn something else." He showed her how to wrap the wire, how to tie it down so it wouldn't snap when pulled taut. His hands worked with slow, easy precision. He didn't speak unless there was something to show. And she liked that about him, the way he didn't fill the air with talk just because it was quiet. She watched carefully, then did it herself. Fumbled, cursed once under her breath. He didn't laugh. Didn't correct her either, just waited while she figured it out. When she got it right, he nodded once. "That'll hold." The sun had risen higher now, and sweat rolled down the back of her neck. Her arms ached from the hammer. The heat made the world feel slow and strange, but she kept working. "You learn quick," he said. She shrugged. "No choice." He glanced at her then. "No, I guess not." They worked 2 hours, maybe more. The ranch stretched wide and dry in every direction, low hills to the west, cottonwoods by the creek, empty pasture to the east, where the wind moved like something alive. In that quiet, the rhythm of their labor began to shape something else. Not trust, not yet, but a sense that maybe they could stand near each other without it hurting. When they reached the last post, he drove it into the ground while she held it steady. She felt the force of the mallet through the wood, the weight of each blow, and something inside her aligned with it, like this was the first real thing she'd done in weeks that hadn't involved running. He stepped back, wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "That'll do." She straightened, brushed the dirt off her skirt, then turned her face to the wind. It cooled her a little. "You hungry?" he asked. She hesitated. "I got eggs," he said, "and bread." "Coffee." That last word made her close her eyes for a moment. Coffee. God, she missed coffee. "I'll pay you back," she said. He nodded once. "All right." They walked toward the house. It was nothing grand, peeling, paint-sagging porch, a screen door that hung just a little crooked, but it stood. And right now that meant something. Inside it smelled of wood smoke and old leather. The floor creaked under her feet. He moved with quiet ease, setting a kettle on the stove, cracking eggs into a pan. She stood near the door, unsure of what was hers to touch. "You can sit," he said. She did. Slowly. The chair groaned beneath her. For a long moment neither of them spoke. He moved through the kitchen with a kind of worn steadiness, like someone used to doing for himself. She looked at his back and wondered what kind of man stayed alone on a place like this. What he'd lost. What he was holding on to. When he set the plate in front of her, she stared at it like it might vanish. 2 eggs overdone, a heel of bread, coffee in a chipped mug. He didn't sit across from her, just leaned against the counter sipping his own. She took a bite. It tasted like salt and grease and survival, and she didn't say thank you, not yet. That word still felt like something too delicate to use. After a while he asked, "How old's your oldest?" 10. And the youngest? 18 months. He nodded like he was trying to picture it. "That's a lot." She didn't answer. "My sister had 4, he said. Said it nearly killed her. 6, almost did." He looked up at that. Not shocked, just quiet. "You got someone chasing you?" he asked. She hesitated. "Not anymore." He didn't ask more. Just sipped his coffee. Outside, the wind rattled the screen door, and somewhere down near the creek a hawk screamed once before going silent again. "You could stay," he said, not looking at her. She stared at her hands, rough now with dirt and fence wire. "I don't need anyone's pity." "It ain't pity," he said. It's an offer." "And what would I be to you?" He looked up at her, then eyes steady. "Someone who fixes fences. Someone who works hard. Maybe someone who gets a second chance." Her throat tightened. She pushed back her plate and stood. "I'll think about it," she said. He nodded. "That's all I'm asking. This road is long and lonely, but no one has to walk it alone. Subscribe and ride beside us." That night she lay on a straw mattress in the loft above the barn, the baby curled against her chest, the others lined up like fence posts under blankets that smelled faintly of hay and smoke. The air was cooler up there, thin and restless. Wind whistled through the gaps in the planks. She didn't sleep for a long time. The man had sent word to the woman who'd taken them in the day before, a widow who traded pies for feed and kindness for nothing at all. He told her they'd be staying at the ranch for a while. She hadn't argued. Just said the children were well behaved and left 2 jars of beans on the porch as thanks. Now the girl, no, the woman she supposed, lay awake, the ache of the day heavy in her arms. She traced the baby's hairline with one finger light as breath. Tomorrow would mean more work, more fence posts, maybe clearing the shed. She didn't know. He hadn't said. But he had brought up a tin of milk for the baby, handed it through the loft door with that same quiet look. She had taken it, still suspicious, still watching for the edge beneath his calm. The baby stirred and whimpered. She patted his back gently, humming something low and wordless. Her voice caught once. She swallowed it down. When she did sleep, it was thin and dreamless. In the morning she woke to the sound of chickens. Not just the clucking, but the man's voice, low and steady as he scattered feed, same rhythm as the day before. She crept down the ladder, barefoot, skirt dragging behind her. "You sleep all right?" he asked, not turning. She didn't answer. Just started gathering eggs, like she'd done it all her life. They worked side by side for most of the morning. She didn't speak unless she had to, but he didn't seem to mind. Once, when she couldn't lift a rusted gate, he stepped in without a word and helped, not making a show of it. Later, when he caught her squinting at a row of tangled wire, he showed her how to strip it clean with a practiced hand. It was during the midday break, while they sat in the shade of the shed drinking water from a shared jar, that he finally said something that shifted the dust between them. "You always this quiet?" She looked up at him. "Talking don't change much." He nodded, rolling the jar between his palms. "No, I guess it don't." She rested her elbows on her knees, watching the light dance on the dust motes in the air. "I used to talk more," she said, surprising herself. Before he waited, before he started drinking, before we had more mouths than money." The words came slow, like pulling a splinter from thick skin. "First time he hit me, I thought it was my fault. Said I was lazy, that I spent too much time with the kids. He didn't flinch, just listened. I stayed, she said, voice low. For years? Stayed until he didn't come back one night. They found his truck upside down in a ditch outside Amarillo. He said nothing. She didn't want comfort, just the quiet understanding that comes from someone who wouldn't try to fix her. After a long silence, he said, my old man drank himself into the ground by the time I was 17. Left me the ranch and nothing else. She looked at him, then really looked. You got no family? Had a brother. Went east. Never came back. What about a wife? He smiled just a little, like the ghost of a grin. Had one. Long time ago. She waited, but he didn't say more. The jar sat between them now, full of silence. That afternoon she helped him mend the roof of the chicken coop. Her hands bled from the wire, but she didn't stop. He handed her a strip of cloth without comment. She wrapped it tight and kept going. When the sun started sinking, he brought out a jar of apple preserves and spread it on toast. The children came down from the loft, sleep-mussed and wide-eyed. He didn't speak to them much, just nodded and let them sit where they wanted. She watched him pour them milk-cut slices of bread. No fuss, no pity, just doing. After the kids were tucked in, she lingered outside. The stars came out in a slow blaze. The wind had settled. The night smelled like sage and warm earth. He stood beside her, arms crossed. You thinking of staying? She didn't answer, but she didn't say no. The next few days came like slow rain, steady and unexpected. She rose with the sun, pulled on the borrowed boots, and worked. The girl who had once flinched at a shadow now swung a hammer like she meant it. She learned the shape of the land under her feet, the way the soil changed near the creek, how the chickens scattered before the wind picked up the old boards that creaked in the porch step before the screen door snapped shut behind you. He gave her space, more than she needed maybe, but that distance made it easier to breathe. He never asked about the bruises that were still fading beneath her sleeves, never asked what she'd left behind. And in return she never asked why a man like him lived alone in a house meant for more than one. In the late afternoons after the work had slowed, she sat on the porch and stitched torn shirts while the children chased each other through the weeds. He'd fixed the rusted swing out back for the littlest one. Didn't say a word about it, just did it. On the fourth evening she found him mending a saddle in the barn. A lantern swung gently above him, casting gold light across his face and the curve of leather in his lap. You always fix things at night? She asked. He looked up, wiped his hands on a rag. There's always something that needs fixing. She stepped inside, arms crossed. You ever stop? Only when I run out of daylight. She leaned against the post, watching him work. There was something quiet about him, but not hollow. Like the silence had roots, not emptiness. My name's May, she said finally. He didn't look up, just nodded. Elias. She stepped forward slowly, fingers grazing the wall. I've been thinking about the work, about staying on. All right. I'd earn my keep. You already are. The quiet between them shifted. She could feel it, how it thickened now, not with suspicion, but with something else. Something softer. You said you had a wife, she said. What happened to her? He paused. She got sick. Lung fever. Winter came early that year. Took her fast. I'm sorry. He nodded. Me too. She stood there for a long time after that, just breathing in the smell of saddle soap and dust. He didn't tell her to go, and she didn't ask if she could stay. That night a storm rolled over the plains, lightning sharp and wild in the sky. The children cried in their sleep. She sat up in the loft, rocking the baby, her back pressed to the barn wall as thunder cracked above. She was still awake when Elias opened the door at first light. His coat was soaked, his hat dripping. You all right? He asked. She nodded, clutching the baby close. Roof held. That's something. She nodded again, not trusting her voice. He stepped back and looked at her like he could see something in her face he hadn't seen before. Come inside when you're ready. I made coffee. Later, when she sat at the kitchen table with the baby on her hip and a warm mug in her hand, she looked around at the worn cabinets, the patched curtains, the pans still crusted from breakfast. It wasn't much, but it was steady. You need help fixing that east fence, she said. He smiled just a little. I do. I'll help. All right. Outside the ground was still damp, the air scrubbed clean by the rain. She stepped onto the porch and felt something settle inside her, not ease, not yet, but something like a beginning. By the second week she knew the rhythm of the ranch better than her own heartbeat. Morning light slid through the east window around 5. The rooster crowed twice, never 3. The children stirred in sequence, the oldest first, already taking to chores without being asked. The baby clung to her hip like a second skin while she boiled water and brushed out snarls from the girl's hair with fingers instead of a comb. Elias never asked for more than she could give, but he accepted what she offered without pretense. He didn't praise her. Didn't need to. The work was its own answer. One morning she found a battered book on the porch bench. A collection of stories. Inside a folded scrap of paper, thought you might like something besides fence posts. No signature. She opened it that night after the kids fell asleep, tracing the underlined sentences and the margins, words someone else had once clung to. It had been years since anyone gave her a gift that wasn't followed by debt. She didn't mention it to Elias. But the next day when she brought him a fresh cup of coffee before he asked, he nodded like maybe he understood the answer she hadn't said out loud. By mid-month she'd taken on more than fences. She learned the sound of the irrigation pump when it faltered. She learned how to wrap a horse's leg when the gelding kicked a post. She dug her hands into earth and grease and manure and found she didn't mind. One afternoon, Elias found her elbow deep in a broken gate hinge, muttering under her breath. He watched for a minute, arms crossed. "You're stubborn," he said. She glanced up, a strand of hair stuck to her cheek. Takes one to know one?" He half smiled. "That's fair." Their eyes met for a beat too long. Not bold, just quiet and sure. Like neither of them had the strength to lie about what was growing in the spaces between words. But the next morning the mail truck brought more than bills, a letter folded in tight squares addressed to May in a neat, unfamiliar hand. She stood with it clenched in her palm, knuckles white. Elias glanced at her but said nothing, gave her space. She read it behind the barn, twice, then folded it up and pressed it into her coat pocket like it might burn through the fabric. When she returned, her face was blank. He didn't ask. The next day she was distracted, sharp-edged, with the children distant with him. By evening she stood on the porch while the sun burned low and red on the horizon, the letter folded in her hand again. He came up behind her, quiet as always. "You leaving?" he asked. She didn't turn. "My sister. She wrote from Wichita. Said she could take us in. Said we could start over." He nodded. Looked past her toward the barn, the hills behind it. "That what you want?" She didn't answer. "I mean it's safe," she said. "A house. A school for the kids. Real town. Safe don't always mean right." She turned then, eyes sharp. "You think I owe you something now?" He didn't flinch. "No, you don't owe me a thing." Silence opened between them, full of heat and distance. "I don't know if I trust this place," she said, finally, voice trembling. "I don't know if I trust myself to keep them safe here." Elias stepped forward, slow and even. "I don't know much," he said. "But I know what I've seen. And I've seen you hold that family together with nothing but grit and a busted pair of boots. I've seen you outwork men twice your size and carry a crying child while pulling a calf from a ditch. You think that means nothing?" She looked away. "I ain't offering ease, May. Just room to stand." She blinked hard once, then again. "I'll give it 2 more weeks," she said. "Then we'll see." "That's all right by me." The sun dropped behind the hills. The wind stirred soft and cool. She stayed on the porch a little longer that night, her back leaning against the post he'd repaired weeks before. A week passed, then another, and still she hadn't packed. She meant to. The letter stayed in her coat pocket like a thorn, a weight against her ribs each time she reached for something else. But somehow the days filled themselves: broken fence posts, a calf-born breach, a child with fever who needed wet cloths, and a lullaby hummed low and steady through the night. The ranch didn't stop to wait for her decision. It kept going, indifferent to her wavering. And maybe that was what made it feel different from every place she'd known before. Here nothing was promised, but nothing was taken either. She and Elias fell into rhythm, wordless most days. She started knowing his habits before he spoke them. He had a way of tugging on the brim of his hat when he was about to ask something uncomfortable. He whistled the same half-tune when he was thinking hard. And sometimes he'd leave small things for her without saying a word: a tin of salve for her cracked hands, a stitched button on the oldest boy's shirt. She gave back in her own quiet way. She scrubbed his boots when he wasn't looking, sewed a tear in his flannel, took over the morning feeding so he could sleep a little longer. One night after the children were asleep, she found him sitting out by the corral staring up at the stars. "You believe in signs?" she asked. He didn't look over, just tipped his chin toward the sky. "I think folks see what they need to see." "What do you see up there?" He thought a moment. "Something bigger than me. Something quiet." She sat beside him, knees drawn up. The sky spread wide and deep overhead, stars thick as salt. "My sister's got a room ready," she said, voice low. "Said there's a job at the diner for me. She already told the manager." He nodded. "I should go. I know that. But—" she sighed. "But when I think of putting the baby in someone else's arms just so I can clear tables for tips, when I think of taking the older ones back to a school full of whispers and questions—" She trailed off. He waited. "I thought the hardest part was leaving," she said. "But it's not. It's choosing not to go back." Elias shifted beside her. Not closer. Just enough that she could feel he was there. "My wife," he said, "she used to say we don't get to pick where we're broken. Just what we build from the pieces." May turned her head toward him. "And what did you build?" He looked at her, then straight on. "Still figuring that out." She let the silence settle between them again. It didn't hurt like it used to. "I think I want to stay," she said. He didn't smile, not fully. Just let out a slow breath like he'd been holding it in for weeks. "All right. I don't want to be taken care of," she added quickly. "I know. And I don't want anything that feels like debt. You won't find it here." She looked down at her hands, rough, scarred, strong. "You'll have to build a proper bunk for the kids." "I will. And the east fence still needs work. We'll get to it. The moon had risen by then, high and clean. The horses stood quiet in the pasture heads low. Somewhere far off a coyote yipped once, then went silent. She stood and brushed the dust from her skirt. "I'll get up early," she said. "We've got a full day." He looked up at her, something like peace softening the lines of his face. "Yes, we do." She walked back toward the house, the porch light glowing dim and steady. Behind her, Elias stayed at the fence, eyes on the sky. That night, for the first time in a long time, she slept without dreams. Spring came early. The snow melt swelled the creek, and the cottonwoods along its banks flushed green. The children roamed barefoot again, their laughter drifting across the pasture like birdsong. May planted beans in the side yard watching for shoots. She learned the timing of the wind and how to predict the rain by the smell of the air. There were still hard days when the baby wouldn't stop fussing, when the milk soured too soon, when old fears pressed close without warning. But there was a steadiness here now, something earned. Elias gave her half the henhouse, said it as if it were nothing, though she knew it wasn't. She took it without fuss, and that was its own kind of understanding. She kept the letter from her sister tucked in the back of the drawer, unanswered. She didn't need to read it anymore. She remembered every word. But each morning she opened her eyes to the groan of the pump and the rustle of Elias's boots on the porch, and that letter felt further and further away. One afternoon they rode out together to mend a gate at the far edge of the property. The sky stretched blue and clean above them, the kind of sky that made you feel like you could outrun anything. She rode ahead, sometimes laughing when her horse cut to the side and kicked up dust. Elias smiled in his quiet way, watching her loosen. When they stopped to rest, they shared a tin of coffee and a strip of dried meat. He glanced over at her elbows on his knees. "You ever think about making this permanent?" She blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean you and the kids. Staying for good." She looked out across the pasture, the horses grazing near the fence, the hills in the distance where the wind curled low and warm. "I thought I already was," she said. He nodded slowly. "I meant not just staying, belonging." She went quiet. "I'm not asking for an answer now," he said, gaze steady. "But I want to build something real, if you want it too." She didn't answer right away, just ran her hand along the worn wood of the gatepost, feeling its grain beneath her palm. "You'd take all of us?" she asked softly. "Already have. And it wouldn't scare me, the mess we bring." He met her eyes then. "You're not a mess, May. You're the strongest damn thing I've seen walk this land." Her throat tightened. "You sure?" "I am." She took a breath, slow and full. The wind brushed her hair back from her face. "Then I'll think about it," she said, but her voice was warm now, not wary. He tipped his hat, smiling without showing teeth. "That's all I'm asking." They rode back side by side. That night, after the children were down, she stood on the porch and watched him in the barn, checking the latch on the stall. The lantern light made long shadows stretch across the dirt. She stepped down barefoot, her arms folded against the chill. He looked up when he heard her coming. "I've been thinking," she said. He straightened. "You've been fixing this place up one piece at a time. What if we did the same with us?" He took a step toward her. "You sure?" She nodded. "I don't want safe anymore. I want solid." His voice was soft. "Then we build." Later, when they sat together under the open sky, hands lightly clasped, she told him something she hadn't said aloud in years. "I want a home. Not just shelter. A place where no one has to ask permission to belong." He squeezed her hand once. "Then we make it." From inside the house a baby cried once, then quieted. The wind rustled the trees, carrying with it the smell of rain, of sage, of something new. The wedding was quiet. No preacher, no paper. Just two people standing on dirt under a cottonwood tree, the oldest boy holding the baby, the girls in mismatched dresses that fluttered in the wind. Elias wore his cleanest shirt tucked proper. May had braided her hair back, no veil, no ring, just her hand in his, steady as the land beneath them. The words weren't rehearsed. They didn't need to be. He promised what he could: shelter, respect, honesty. She promised back work, heart, truth. No one clapped when it was done. No one needed to. The children hugged her legs, then ran back toward the house, chasing the scent of bread from the oven. Later, Elias carved a new mark into the barn beam. just initials carved shallow with his knife, M+E, like boys might scratch into a desk or a tree. He didn't say a word while he did it. She didn't need him to. In spring she planted tomatoes. In summer, corn. The girls took to gathering eggs without being told. The boys rode the younger horses bareback down by the creek, coming home soaked and smiling. The baby walked before the first frost, spoke his first word boot while chewing on one of Elias's old leather soles. May kept the letter from Wichita in the drawer, but one day in October she took it out, read it one last time, then fed it to the stove, watched the flame take the edges, then the center until nothing was left but ash and the curl of smoke up the flue. That night Elias found her on the porch, arms folded, cheeks red from the cold. "I burned it," she said. He didn't ask what she meant, just nodded. Didn't feel like it was mine anymore. It wasn't. She leaned into his side, the wind tugging at the hem of her coat. "I used to think love was loud," she said. "Big. Something that swept you off your feet. And now?" She smiled, faint but full. "Now I think it's a quiet thing. A thing that shows up with coffee in the morning. That fixes boots without being asked. That leaves the porch light on." Elias looked out at the dark fields, the stars coming on one by one. "Then I think we've got it." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in silence that didn't need filling. Inside, the house was lit with soft lamps, the children already asleep, their shoes in a line by the door. May reached for his hand. "We should build that extra room," she said, "for the kids, and maybe another." He turned to look at her. She didn't say more, just placed his hand gently on her belly. His eyes widened, not with shock, but something deeper. He opened his mouth, then shut it, overwhelmed by quiet joy. She smiled again. "Told you we were building?" That winter the storms came hard. Snow piled high and fences needed mending in the dark. Elias shoveled paths, while May chopped wood. The children learned how to layer wool, how to share warmth, how to watch out for one another without being told. In the evenings they gathered by the fire. May read from the same book he'd once left on the porch. The pages wore soft with used corners folded by small hands. In spring the baby came, born in the house with Elias at her side, steady and pale, his hand wrapped around hers so tight it left marks. She didn't cry, not until it was over, not until the child was in her arms and Elias whispered, "You did it," like he couldn't believe it was real. They named her Grace. And on a warm evening a few weeks later, with the porch light humming and the air smelling of lilac and cut grass, May sat with Grace against her chest, Elias beside her, the children playing in the yard. The sun dipped low golden across the fields. She looked at all of it, this life stitched from broken things, this home built board by board, and knew there was no going back. Only forward. Only love, quiet and sure as the earth beneath them. If you've ever carried regret like a shadow at sundown, subscribe and see how others learn to live with it.